And now I get to introduce Dr. Molly Miller. I met her here at Fort Negley, and we just hit it off right from the very beginning. I used to be sent in the summer to upper New York State because my mother worked, and this was in the 40s and the 50s. And there was nothing to do up there, no libraries, nothing to do. And I had lived in Boston all my life till I went to the farm. So the only thing that distracted me were all the wonderful fossils that I found. They were absolutely terrific. And I would take in my suitcase fossils home, and my mother would get rid of them once I got home. But nonetheless, we hit it off on that point. She said I was in wonderful fossil country. Nobody knows more about what's going on underground here, more than Elon Musk. And she's going to tell us about that today. Dr. Molly Miller, from 30 years at Vanderbilt, now retired, and running a wonderful program here for kids. Dr. Miller?
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I hope that we can interest you in what's underground too, because if we don't all know and then we're not interested, then I'm afraid that other powers will take over. So anyhow, it's hard to talk entirely about Elon Musk and the Boring Company because there's so many things about our geologic history that impact us today. So what I'm going to do in just a minute at least is to sort of give you a rundown of some of the characteristics of Ice Age. We're getting a high school student here. Come on in, kiddo. These things affect us today, and we don't even know about it or care about it. And so the idea is that the past, the ancient past, has really affected the Civil War and now, and will continue to affect many things in the future, and that's what we're going to talk about. So, before we do that, Tracy, can we turn on the light? Thanks. Sage is going to put you to work. And would you get the other end here? Yes. Kind of hold it up as high as you can. This is a timeline of the Earth. You got to move back a little bit. 4.5 billion years of time of the Earth. And that's with 1 inch equals 20 million years. Kind of puts your sort of things in perspective. And the green down there is the earliest evidence of life, right here. And there's some record, but life really took off down here. And this yellow is the time of all of our rocks in Middle Tennessee are of this age. So keep this in mind. And Sage's fingers are covering up the human history. And the blue here is the time of dinosaurs. So just keep that in mind. Thank you. Thank you. So that's sort of the background. And so a lot of people get mixed up. I get called an archaeologist commonly, and that's not, I don't know anything about it really, because what we have are historians whose main topic is humans, and the time frame they operate under is the last barely sliver on that timeline, and they use written records, I believe. Archaeologists are on the same timeline of just thousands of years, really, and they use artifacts to reconstruct that part of human history. But geoscientists, we take the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle. And actually, I should say that I'm not an expert on Nashville geology. I just taught introductory geology for so many years and lived in it that I know something. I'm actually much more of an Antarctic geologist than I am of this. So that's just if I said something wrong, that's the reason. Anyhow, so let's go back. Oh yeah, the takeaway points I'd like to make, and make them 100 times because I think it's important. The ancient past, all of that before human history, can be reconstructed based on rocks and the preserved components they have. Those components can be chemical, physical, or biological. Now, the ancient history is controlled and really influenced the Civil War history, as well as other parts of human history. Why is Fort Negley on this fabulous hill? Why is that hill there? If it hadn't been there, would the Civil War have gone on a lot longer? You have to think about that thing. And also, it is really involved in environmental, economic, and political decisions of issues today. Now, I must say that it has been referred to, Tennessee is currently just starting up a new geological survey. It has no office in Nashville. And so we don't have a rich geologic history in the public arena. I call it a geologic desert, and you guys are getting a mouthful of that water that is available from our rocks and our situation here. And the influence of our geologic ancient past is going to continue into the future. But right now, it's really a big factor that people don't really take advantage of or understand. And that's a big point. Now, let's go back to 460 million years ago. And, Earth was really different. And those are all the continents that are moving around. And, it's funny. When I went to college, they didn't even know that continents moved around like that. It wasn't widely accepted. That's pretty amazing, now, because now it just kind of is. And so the North America is that blob over around the equator to the left. It's sort of in the left-hand part. Yep. Well, anyhow, the red X is North America with a little bit of a covered, much of it was covered by an ocean, shallow ocean, and we are in Middle Tennessee where the red X is. If we zero in, this is the North America at that time, and notice how much ocean. The light blue is shallow ocean, the dark blue is deep ocean, and the brown is land, and we on X are a long way from the nearest land. And that makes a difference, as we'll see in a minute, and it affects us all the time. Now, Fort Negley is really a special place. Now, I got familiar with Fort Negley because Vanderbilt isn't far away, and we had to take students on field trips. So this was a really convenient place to come. And in fact, probably shouldn't admit this, but I will anyhow. I didn't know that it was a Union fort until 2014. All I knew was it had great limestone that you wouldn't get killed by a speeding motorist when you were standing on the side of the road. Because most of our great exposures of limestone are along the roads, and that's really a problem. But here, it's great. And it turns out that there are exquisite fossils preserved in the ridges where they come out. And this, in fact, is an upright coral colony that is this far, this wide. It has a bottom that is attached to, at the bottom, yeah, obviously. But it's upright in the position that it was growing in 460 million years ago. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. And each of those lines is the house of a small coral polyp. Of course, it rotted when it died, but, yeah. So we have 3 different layers in Nashville, and this is just a diagram I find pretty it shows there's the Batman building, and we are in sort of this basin. But at Fort Negley, we can also see the things that, the characteristics that tell us what it was like. And Calvin's right hand is on a layer that looks very different. See how it's got layers within that layers? Now, how did those layers form? And what does that tell us about what was like then? Well, and there's also not a lot of fossils in it, just broken pieces of shells. Now, turns out the way you study this stuff is you go after a giant hurricane or a small hurricane. It's like, unfortunately, what's approaching Jamaica right now. And what is going to happen, there will be sand that is eroded. And as in the next couple days, as that hurricane leaves, it's going to deposit some, probably no more than this much, even if there's a big hurricane. And that layer will have layers that are characteristically deposited by a hurricane. Right here at Fort Negley, we apply what is known about modern hurricane layers, and that layer where his hand is probably deposited by a hurricane. It's got the characteristic layering within it. And and we don't know the size. All that shallow ocean must have had a potential for gigantic hurricanes that perhaps we don't even know the scale of. And one of the reasons we know this happened is because there's an upside down coral head right underneath the big one. Apparently whatever hurricanes were occurring were not big enough to overturn this big giant hurricane coral head we have up in Fort Negley limestone, but this one was much smaller. And so we can reconstruct what it looked like, and probably pretty similar to the Bahamas. Shallow, forever ocean. Now, an important thing for Nashville's future after 460 million years ago was the fact that the land in Brown that's made up of sand and rock that weathered into sand and silt was too far away for that sediment on land to make it to Nashville, Middle Tennessee. So what happened is that the only sediment that accumulated on that shallow ocean floor was the shells and debris and broken material of calcium carbonate, or the mineral calcite. And that's what our rocks are. It's limestone. Now the thing about limestone that's quite interesting, and I guess actually we might get a piece of limestone and a piece of a little bottle of dilute acid. I don't know, many of you may have seen what happens. How many people have seen what happens when you dribble a little acid on limestone? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it dissolves and turns into a liquid. So that means that all of our limestone that's eroding is being dissolved and carried down into the Cumberland River and going into the Gulf of Mexico, which leaves us with not very much soil. And that is a real issue. That is only because. Why is that? It's because of this map of 460 million years ago. So, now, how fast does this dissolution occur? Well, depends on how much it rains. Now, you probably read that one of the products of the boring company is tunnels in Las Vegas. Las Vegas gets about 4.7 inches of rain a year. So how much is it going to dissolve? Not much. Contrast that with Nashville. 47 inches of rain a year, so that there's a huge amount of dissolution that can go on. And in fact, this goes on remarkably fast. Now, I don't know if you've looked around the flagpole here at Fort Negley, but here's the memorial headstone that was carved in about 1939. Can you read it? There is a G in there, but that's about all you can read. And the reason is that the rest of the carving is unrecognizable because of the dissolution by rain. What happens is the rainwater, it comes through the atmosphere and it combines with carbon dioxide and it makes a weak carbonic acid. And that's what over time does the dissolution. And so this is our ledges. That's where the coral is. And these cuts were made in the 1930s. Now, let's consider that yellow part on the timeline is the kind of the time that the rocks around Nashville were deposited. And this diagram shows the layers. The bottom layer is that what we have right outside, and here right at Fort Negley, and it goes down for hundreds of feet. It's limestone. On top of that is some black shale that's about 15 feet thick, and it kind of falls apart, but it's actually loaded with organic matter. And in fact, there's so much organic matter in this rock that it burns. You could take a barbecue opener, turn her on her, you know, those flames, and it'll actually ignite. Right at 7, it's all around, not always well preserved. And then on top of that, and this is really important, is a chert-rich rock. And the importance of it, and it was deposited originally in a delta or ocean, as was the black shale and the limestone. And the thing about it is that we don't know how the chert got in it very well. I mean, it's not very well understood. That's silica, and it replaced some of the rock that was already there. We're not sure when, we're not sure why, and that's partly because we don't have a very big and investigative geological survey as part of our geologic desert. But and then after that, there was a whole big slew of limestone that goes over all the way to the Waverly area. And then actually, what might have been there, and this is confusing, is right about that time, the Appalachian Mountains were as big as the Himalayas, and they were shedding sediment. And we assume that they shed it over toward the west, toward Nashville, but it's not there. So does that mean, no, there really never was any sediment, or that it's been eroded away? And that's one of the frustrating kind of questions that's basically unanswerable until somebody gets some little crazy hint and help them. So we don't know. And around here, the top of the second limestone is our sort of top. Gotta show you, this is that black shale, and actually at 9 Mile Hill and other places, it was really cruddy. what happened was that there was so much algae in this, and there were no trees. I just can't get a picture of a place in an ocean where there's this much algae. At least I couldn't, anyhow. And in fact, there were just beginning to be trees at this time, but that water is just thick with algae, floating algae. And that's what it was like here about 360 million years ago. And there was so much organic matter that it would begin to rot, but the oxygen in this water would be used up and it would quit. And so the organic matter was preserved, and it's altered, and so during the time it became gas and petroleum and so forth. And the other thing that happened was that there was uranium that accumulated onto the organic matter. And it's just, we won't talk about this, but it's because it's an ancillary thing. But that uranium, when it weathers in the Nashville Basin, goes through a number of changes into radon gas. And that's why a lot of houses in basements and closed areas in Nashville have radon gas. It's because of this ancient situation. Well, the closest thing that I've come to locally to the kind of algal slurry in this kind of swamp thing, and I must say that it doesn't smell very good either, is, it's funny, is Radnor Lake. Now, you're not allowed to go into Radnor Lake, and they have all these signs saying, stay out of the water. I say, why have any signs? Let people go in. They won't go back in again. It's just full of organic matter and algae, and plus the friendly leeches that get on your legs at the same time. So that's but this was a huge area covered by this, and it's a major, major source of petroleum products. And this is what is fracked in Pennsylvania. The same unit extends all the way to Pennsylvania, but it's here too. And that's what it looks like, the Chattanooga Shale, it's called, and it always erodes. And so and it also has a fair amount of sulfur in it, so that when you see it and drive by it, you see this yellow stuff on these rocks. And that's why, if you're familiar with 9 Mile Hill, right above Percy Warner Boulevard, it's exposed there. It's exposed along Old Hickory Boulevard. It's exposed along just places, variable places around Nashville. But on top of that is this chert-rich rock that don't understand how it got rich in chert, but it is. And chert is silica, and it's tough to erode. And it also has geodes. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Nameless, Tennessee. It's over by just west of Cookville. And supposedly, there's so much chert, and it's in the form of geodes. And you can go over along the road there and just collect geodes made of the same material that's making this chert. Well, so that's the background. That's what happened. Those are our rocks, and that's what we're dealing with. Now, the question is, how did that affect the history of Fort Negley, or probably in that time, or also, how does it affect us today? And the question is, the first thing is that because this rock all dissolved, we have very little soil. How many people have noticed that in their day-to-day? Yeah, all these gardeners, you know, no, and you drive around in freeways, and it's like, whoa, there's no soil. Well, in fact, it affected Fort Negley in a very negative way, because all the other, many other Civil War forts to the west and so forth, they take soil, sort of make a, mud. They pack together mud and soil, and that would be a good fort that would last long enough. imagine the disappointment when very little soil. And so that meant that the people that built Fort Negley, and I can't imagine this, they had to quarry the rock from right here. And Fred Zahn, who's in the Historical Commission, and I hope that he's going to be he's been here several times. He is an expert preservationist and figured out how they actually did this. And see what they did, they drew little, pounded in little chisels, and then oh, thanks. and then eventually there'd be so many holes in it that you could just take a hammer. He got the kids away before he does it, and you just give it a big whack, and it'll break into a piece. But do you know how many times they'd have to do this for Fort Negley? It's unbelievable. And also, one of the things you might have heard one of the officials of the boring company saying is that the limestone is really hard. Well, thank heavens for the makers of Fort Negley that the limestone is not hard. It's a hardness of 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, from talc being 1 and diamonds being 10. So it is not particularly hard, and it makes it much easier in a way if they have to do all this cutting up to have it be as soft as it is. Sort of makes you wonder, Okay, environmental issue is with the limestone, there's no soil, as we just said, and that means there's no soil to soak up all the water. And as we have tremendous rains, and we'll have more as global warming continues, what do we have, like 14 inches of rain in 48 hours in 2010. And this is just a picture. That's the Batman building from the side and the river flooding. The other problem that we have that continues today, and in fact, I'm thinking that the government officials are ignoring it, thinking that if they just don't pay attention, maybe the problem will go away. That is, for a sanitary landfill, you need to cover up with soil all the garbage that is deposited in a day. We don't have it. In fact, let's see, where does our garbage go?
Middle Point.
Middle Point, yeah, that's right. And I don't know, this is not Middle, yeah, I guess it is Middle Point. Yeah, I think it is. But we do not have any household garbage landfill in the Davidson County. Isn't that amazing as our population grows that we don't have any of that? And that is an issue that is so difficult. What are we going to do? Going to import soil to cover up the garbage? I mean, it's a problem. We do send it to Middle Point landfill. Oh, we do have along Ashland City Highway, that's a construction debris landfill, which is different from garbagey landfill. But also, hey, if we're going to cut down and tear down all the 50s and 60s houses, what are we going to do with all of the debris? In fact, Mr. Musk, what's your plan for all the debris that you're going to carve out of the rock to make a tunnel? There's no answer on that one. So here at Middle Point, that's our garbage that's not covered up. And Murfreesboro doesn't have much more soil than we do either. I don't know what they're doing. I do know, I have heard that they have, because the smell can be pretty bad, they have these big towers that they spray out cherry smelling materials. Yeah. So some more environmental, and because of this, again, being too far away from land to get any, so they only have limestone. One issue that we have is that limestone dissolves and it creates unpredictable landscapes flowing through the ground as it and dissolves the limestone with an E. This rapid deposition causes rock fractures to become large conduits. Now, you can say, how do we know that? Well, in a few minutes, it also forms sinkholes, caves, and these big, fat conduits called solution valleys. But we can't see them because we usually don't see things in 3 dimensions like that. So we don't know where they are. The boring company doesn't have any idea where they are. And because the features are not well mapped at all in 3 dimensions. But we can get some idea that they're there because if you drive along I-440 and I-40, you can actually see this stuff. Let's see if that's, yeah, this is a sort of a diagram of what it looks like, and you can see in this picture you're seeing it in 2 dimensions, sort of, but you don't know what's in the middle of there. Now, here's an analogy, sort of. It's got problems. It doesn't have as many cracks, but you can certainly see that these caverns and sinkholes would be in here. Now, what did this mean for Fort Negley and people building Fort Negley? We're not really sure. In fact, we're initiating a program to try to look at places where the intense, hugely densely populated workers were here in Fort Negley, and presumably their latrines were here, and presumably they were getting water from somewhere. Now, this was back in the 1860s, of course, and the germ theory was not really thought out and generally accepted. So we don't know for sure, but there was not very good food, terrible exposure, but it's very likely, it seems to me, that this pollution, the possible pollution and all this fluid exchange in the rocks would have a negative impact on the population of workers, and in fact about 800 died in a relatively short period of time. And so what we're doing is we're initiating a plan for using ground penetrating radar to get a 3D picture of what's underneath here and see what that effect might be. So this is the boring companies. They like to point out that there are places where this limestone is solid rock and great for boring. And this actually is, anybody recognize this place? There's not that many places like this, but this is just going on Briley Parkway. If you go north from White Bridge Road off of I-40, it's a pretty big cliff, and it looks pretty solid, but that's not always the case. Now, I encourage you, the trouble with going along freeways and stopping is that it's illegal. That's all right, you know, be quick. But I'm going to show you some pictures of these conduits and fractures and evidence of dissolution along I-440. And you can see it along I-40 as well. See that crack? That was a crack, and then water flowed down the crack, a tree got in there, and the fracture is getting larger and larger. And so it's more and more of a conduit for running water. This is, notice that if you go down I-440, if you go east from I-65 toward Hillsborough Village, Hillsborough Road, this is right, you can see this big old Solution Valley. Now, sometimes there's actually holes, and they went to, I-440 was really expensive to build, and partly because they had to shore up all the holes and fractures and so forth. Now you see where the arrow, red arrow on the bottom is pointing to the artificial wall that probably filled in a little cave or sinkhole. And then they also were careful to put in drainage holes and drainage pipes. So you can see those along I-440 and I-40. It's not clear that the boring company has really thought about, how much does it cost? And the other thing on I-40 over toward West End on the south side of I-40, there are gorgeous rock walls. There were apparently holes or caves, and when they built I-440 in the early 80s, they constructed these very attractive walls out of the rocks that were nearby. And so if you look in there, you can probably see a drain. Yep, there's a few drainage. Tracy, can you see that drainage hole? Yeah, yeah. Drainage holes, but also they manipulated all those rocks to make the solid rock wall. And here's another one. That one was a lot of work, and it's expensive. So this money-making deal may not be that much of a great deal when you come down to it. This is on the south side of I-40, just west of West End. Okay, so it turns out that environmental issues cause a lot of trouble, political trouble as well in Nashville. First of all, I must say, did you know that Governor Lee did not, well, he has not said that he consulted Tennessee's own geologists about whether or not this is a good idea. Now, we have geologists, and they work really hard because there's not very many of them, for the state. What does it say to the state, to those employees, that the governor doesn't even consult them with questions about building and the wisdom of engaging in this tunnel operation? And I incidentally, since I talked to the state geologists, or actually what I did was to suggest that WPL and Caroline Eggers talk to the state geologists, and apparently they've been told they're clearly not to talk about this, so that's why you're not hearing the state geologists on the, but you know what? I think you think the same thing, I think. Okay. The other problem with this limestone is that it results, the lack of soil required huge drain fields, or the paucity of soil required huge drain fields for septic systems that were the norm until the late 70s, at least, or 70s, over much of Davidson County. And that's why the yards in many places are so big. Does everybody really like to mow that much lawn? Well, the reason for it was to get a total amount of soil that was enough to filter the yucks out of the water that was going through it. Now, in a growing city like we have, it's a pretty inefficient use of land for everybody to have an acre or more. And so that's a lot of inefficient use of space, especially for a rapidly growing city like Nashville. And the result of that has been either the growth and abundance of tall and skinny houses, which is actually I grew up in Schenectady, New York, and I thought all houses were tall and skinny houses, but they are common in many places. Or in some places, there's a 2-acre lot, and so the idea is you fill that whole area with house, and it's gigantic. Of course, I don't know what that does for expanding affordable housing. And this general situation has resulted in sort of discord regarding development issues. And you can see that, at least in Westmead, by all these little white and green signs that say, "Save our neighborhoods," which means save our acreage, which means, yeah. And one of the other things about it is that there's very low population density in some areas, makes it difficult for efficient mass transportation. So it's all kind of related. And let's see. Yeah, I went out in my backyard this morning, and we lived on a 1/4 acre lot that needed to be mowed incredibly often in May. And so we sort of changed styles. But this is very close into Nashville, it's convenient. But if you look at the bottom of those trees, of moderate size, you'll see there's rock. And this was a forested refuge from development because of the fact that it was so rocky that there wasn't, even no matter how big you made the lot, it couldn't sustain a septic system. And so we actually had to blast through rock to connect with the sewer. Oh, hey, that's all that negative stuff. There's one really cool thing. This is a graphic 1-page novel of this, you could call it a sinkhole success. That is this poor saber-toothed cat walking along, drops into a sinkhole, cannot get out, and expires in the sinkhole. And now we don't know what happened to his ribs, and all the soft parts decayed, but he ended up with a well-preserved skull in the original first American building parking lot. When they excavated to build the parking lot, they found the skull of the saber-toothed cat who had unfortunately fallen into the sinkhole and couldn't get out. Now, normally, that's the only one there is. Does that mean that that was the only living saber-toothed cat 10,000 years ago? Very unlikely. But mostly the bones get washed downhill and destroyed, but his fell into the sinkhole and were preserved. So fortunately, we have the predators. Okay. Now another really important, let's see how we're doing here. Oh, okay. Another important environmental issue are landslides. And what you see is, thank you, Warner Parks, Vera Roberts, for giving this picture of a cut up landslide from 2010 in the Warner Parks. Oop, let's see. And the part of Nashville that is prone to landslide is shown in a red line, or actually it's up in the Chert Ridge and Black Shale area. And the reason that happens is this. Let's see. We got something. The lower part of this black shale is the Chattanooga Shale, and we call it the scratch and sniff rock. If you take a picture of this rock and scratch it with a knife or anything, it smells like an oil refinery. It releases the hydrocarbons, and that common. But it falls apart pretty well. On top of this is this chert-rich layer that is very hard to erode. And it's not clear why the chert was emplaced or when, but the effect is pretty clear. Because we have, this is a diagram that gives you the basic gist, showing the Nashville city in this basin. Now, how does this happen? First of all, this whole area was pushed up a little bit to make a broad arch, and we won't go into why that. And at the top of the high point was this chert-rich rock. That chert-rich rock was so tough and so hard to dissolve. It doesn't dissolve like the limestone does. So it was very slow to erode. And it would finally, you get little areas through the chert-rich rock, and then it would hit the limestone and it was like gone. Instant, not really instantly, but very quickly it would be dissolved and have a huge basin underneath it. So what happened was you get this picture of the chert-rich rock being very resistant to erosion and make a steep slope, and then the underneath rock being dissolved very quickly and being undercut. And this is our topography of Nashville. Now, the early people who lived in Nashville lived in the limestone part, down where it was flat. And in fact, they really left those steep slopes. Oh, they stayed away from them. Why try to farm on a steep slope? And the result of that is this really beautiful forest, the Highland Rim Forest. Some of those trees are really old, and it's a unique thing for Nashville to have this Highland Rim Forest that grows on these very steep slopes. But that's what happened. Is that clear? How it just happened because of the nature of the rock that was being subjected to water. And so think about our town where we live. And I should say the basin is much wider. It goes all the way over to Center Hill Lake. And you know, actually, if you're driving down to I-40 and you come close to Center Hill Lake, you go up a very steep slope. And that's the slope that you see that's being held up by that chert-rich rock. In Nashville, think about all the places you go hiking and it's really hilly. Like Warner Park's Red Trail. You get up to the top of the hill on the Red Trail and you'll notice that the rocks are in perfect rectangles and they have very sharp corners because of the fact it's got so much chert in it and it's very resistant to being rounded. Beeman Park, great park, and the higher parts are held up because the rim goes all around Nashville, and it's because of this. Now, I will say, that Fort Negley is here as a hill for the same reason as I just described. In that diagram, we've shown it as like it's one steep slope, but in fact, there are hills of decreasing size away from that steep slope. And one of those decreasingly somewhat smaller hills is this hill that we're sitting next to, where Fort Negley was built. Anybody know or think of another hill that's like that you might come across all the time?
The reservoir.
What's that?
The reservoir.
Yes, Reservoir Hill, exactly. Well, how about another one? Capitol Hill, absolutely. Those would be, give them another couple million years, maybe it wouldn't take that long, they'd be flattened too. They're just off that main loci of erosion. The high parts of the Radnor Lake area. So the west extension goes, it actually is relatively high. And it's when you go over I-40 west and you go up between Charlotte and Bellevue. And then after Bellevue, you continue up past, and by Kingston Springs, it's of the younger limestone. And so it's higher and it's flatter, west of Nashville.
So all the way to the Mississippi?
No, not all the way to the Mississippi. All the way to certainly Waverly, over to the Tennessee River. And then that has eroded lower.
Yeah, I moved to Nashville in 1960. I was born in West Tennessee, but when I got here, the limestone, the water just tasted terrible to me.
Let's hope that the limestone contributed very safe components that didn't taste so good. Let's hope it wasn't something else.
I still don't like Nashville water.
Yeah, okay.
How
Yeah, do you-
deep is it? Because I've heard the boring guy speak, and he said it's gonna be 50 feet below the surface. Now, I don't know how you define the surface, because we have hills and things.
That's a good question. Unanswered. One thing I would say.
Below the streams and the existing subterranean infrastructure.
I wonder, I mean, that's quite a process. There are tunnels that have been built since Nashville, and we haven't heard anything about those. So that's two different things, is how deep they're gonna have to go, what's underneath there in terms of caves. You know that there are caves in Davidson County. There's a Westmead Cave in Bellevue right there. There's Ashland City Cave. So that it's not too surprising that there might be some other things. And all of those questions, in fact, as far as I've been kind of keeping track of it, I haven't heard any civil engineer who's built tunnels in limestone terrains making comments about this tunneling process. Okay. Now, the other thing is these landslides. We don't know this very much, but there were over 500 landslides in those 2 days in Davidson County alone. Oh, wait a minute. Now, to trigger a landslide, here's what you do. It happens naturally, but there's a number of things that can be done to encourage landslides. So one thing is to steepen the slope. And if you have a slope like this and you want to build a house on it, you got a problem. Who wants a sloping house? So what they do is they cut a terrace. You've probably seen that. And that is fine, except that it creates another slope behind it that is steeper than the original slope. So that results in something that is potentially less stable than the natural hill was underneath it. You add a whole lot of water, like, oh, poor Jamaica. You know, they said, I just heard maybe 30 inches of rain, you know, and it's a pretty hilly terrain. Oh my goodness.
And also I had to wait to what's below the slab.
Right. Wait a minute, say that again, I did.
It adds weight
Exactly.
to whatever's supporting the slab.
Right. So when you build a 6,000 square foot house, you're adding quite a bit of weight. Now, and I should say that the steep slopes were not developed and were pretty much left alone, and that's why the Highland Rainforest is such a unique, it's really a unique thing from Nashville, goes all the way around, and it's gorgeous. But they avoided cutting down those trees. The other thing is that now, when they develop things, they cut down the trees, and that stops these big old trees that are sucking up water from the ground, including all that rain that might be in there, and transpiring it into the atmosphere. So you're stopping this natural process. So, and the developers love to build these big houses and and going into these beautiful places to have views. So, I hope that I've convinced you that the ancient history of 460 million years ago and later exerted a strong influence on the Civil War process, made them build a stone fort, the largest stone fort west of Washington, D.C., at great cost in human suffering, and also that it exerts control or influence on modern environmental and political issues of today. Now, what can you do about this? Well, write your representatives, but also, well, let's see. We have a program at Fort Negley. It's called, I don't know, actually, it doesn't have a name, but but we have programs where people learn about the ancient history of the Nashville area and its impacts on today. Now, about 1,200 kids in 4th grade come to Fort Negley during the year. It's an all-volunteer program. Did you hear that? An all-volunteer program. And we have guided training program, and the kids, and it's geared to the state science standards for the grades that learn earth science. And tell you the truth, I'm a former teacher, and I want to make everything fun. The main thing that kids come here is that they have fun, and they think of the earth as fun and important. So if you want to be a part of that, we got a little sign up right here. There's no big time commitment, but I know that's kind of taggy to ask you, but then anyhow, think about it. It's fun. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah. If anybody has any questions, I'll be delighted to answer. Yes, sir.
At some point, my understanding is that Tennessee limestone, which is very soft, the geology underground as it gets closer to Indiana, the limestone is much harder. And that's why we use Indiana limestone in many of our buildings. Where does that happen in under the ground? Where does that happen?
How does it happen? It happens, so there's two things. One is you have deposition of the particles that make up the rock, and the other is in a sedimentary rock, you have some kind of fluid going through those particles and depositing a cement, which
So that makes the limestone in Indiana harder?
Yep.
Then there's Kansas limestone that's even harder, right?
I don't know.
We wanted to use it because you can use thinner slabs of Kansas limestone. We've used Indiana limestone, but Tennessee limestone, you're right, it just doesn't last. It's a building material.
Mm-mm. And you can see it if it does that to that tombstone or memorial stone in that short a period of time, it's going. Yeah. Yes.
If the state geologists can't go on the radio to talk about this, why don't you? No?
I have. In fact, I will say that I am recovering from abdominal surgery. I had a gallbladder out, and I was talking to Caroline Eggers, and she said, well, why don't they know anything about the insides of these rocks? And I said, I can have an MRI and they can know so much about my abdomen, but we don't know anything about these rocks that are along, that are so important in how we live and how our society works. So, yeah. Yes?
Yes, do you, where the boring tunnel is, it's starting at the airport, or it's going, I guess, into the main, what? So it's going under major parts of the system.
But it's, Interestingly, it's on state property. Yeah. But I don't know, the people have been being pretty little good diggers for a couple hundred years. And I know that there are, I don't know all the details of where tunnels and things are in Nashville, but they are there, and then there are natural conduits as well. Yeah. Yes?
Is the state applying right away in the parking lot?
It's already has right of way
It is.
for a road. Ain't that?
Yeah, it is. Apparently. Pardon?
Under the road. Oh, it's gonna be totally under the road?
Yes, and there's going to be Teslas in there driving people to and from. Yes?
Is it true they were gonna have to lease the land above the tunnel?
I do not know.
I heard that.
No, the above the tunnel is the existing highway.
Yeah. Oh, it's already, no, it's all developed. You know, it's like, imagine you're driving from downtown to the airport. It's, yeah, it's, yes.
You've really inspired me to learn more about the geology and tunnels, so thank you. What would be, the only tunnel I've been in is the Channel Tunnel between England and France.
Oh, I wish I'd been there.
But what would be the best rock for a tunnel such as this?
Well, it would be like the Holland Tunnel and those tunnels in New York City, Lincoln Tunnel. Those are made of metamorphic and igneous rock that are more completely farther, well held together than this rock would be. Yes, sir.
In a nutshell, what's the bottom line on this? What's gonna happen when they start boring?
I have no idea. I know that they have, that they've developed, have you seen the picture? It's named after some character in a novel, The Proof It. And it's a machine that it's supposed to be able to, it sort of grinds through rock really quickly.
It's unbelievable what they say it can do. It puts precast concrete sections to enclose the tunnel. There's six sections to make the full 360 degree thing.
Yeah.
It puts in ventilation system, water lines, electrical lines, ventilation systems. One huge machine does all these things.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I want to point out there have been over 800 issues with the one in Las Vegas. So,
Oh, thank you.
And I also want to point out that there was absolutely no consultation with the city of Nashville, or there were no impacts. Nothing at all was done before this agreement was made. They've already started boring.
And-
test boring.
Right, and they keep, it's hard to keep track of because it's sort of little things and like recently, they're making some diggings, I don't know what, near Vanderbilt on Broadway. What do they need that for if it's supposed to go from downtown to, and again, it's not drawing on the expertise that exists in this city.
Because there's also pressure to, we want a tunnel too, like have it come to the convention center, have it go to Opryland.
Yeah. And the other funny thing is there's not a real competition for more tunnels to be built by the boring company. I think for one thing, they had a fair number of accidents during the building process in Las Vegas. Again, it's way behind schedule. And the other thing with it is that we have a lot of water that comes in deluges. Las Vegas, not so much. And it also means that there's less dissolution and of the rock internally in Los Angeles, in Las Vegas, than there would be here. Yeah. Yeah.
I also,
Yeah.
can I just say thank you so much for bringing up our landfill issue. Our landfills are at capacity, and we are in big trouble, and we have a law called the Jackson Law that makes that complicated, but I have a bill called Tennessee Waste to Jobs that will actually address that. So it's on, I have a website, Tennessee Waste to Jobs, and please take a look at it because it will bring funding for getting some of that stuff out of the landfill.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, there's a lot to go, and we're growing fast, even more. Yes, ma'am.
So
Back
the
there.
caves constantly evolve their path because things are washing out?
I don't know. I'll tell you, I was lost in a cave when I was 11. I don't go near them. I don't even read about them. Yes, sir.
There was a letter to the editor of the Tennessean maybe a month ago. It was written by a man who had been a superintendent on the project to create a tunnel downtown, quite a large one. It was not anywhere near the distance of that Boring's talking about. And it was done with lower technology than the proof rock.
The proof rock, that's it.
And, but in any event, he was very positive about the prospects of this. Are you familiar with that? I believe it was for runoff.
The question is, where is it going to go? And that's really a problem. The runoff that we have right now, we have serious problems with runoff, and every time it rains.
That was what I believe that tunnel was for.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's interesting if you think about it. Maybe the Boring Company tunnels are going to be runoff. I sure hope, I'm not taking that thing. No. Because with a huge amounts of rain, it could easily get into the tunnels and be. Are there any other questions? You guys, great, thank you. Oh, thank you.